So, you want to write a story. Can't really blame you. But before we get into all the awesome ideas and concepts, and even the multitude of genres that are out there, we first need to start with the basic framework. First, we need to talk about the character. Roll the intro. Hi, my name is Steve, editor of these videos and of Night Owl Streams, and today we're going to be telling you how to write us stories characters, with this episode being dedicated to the one, the only, the protagonist. Okay, look, I know I'm not the best at generating hype, but bear with me here. First, let's talk about what the protagonist is. The protagonist is the main character, the narrator, the storyteller, and the character that the story focuses on the most. But more importantly, the protagonist is the person that goes through the most change throughout a story. Thus, the focus is directly placed onto him. For this scenario, let's take a look at one good and one bad example of a well-developed protagonist and a poorly developed protagonist. First, let's see a good one. And the first one I can think of that's notable and memorable is Raiden from Metal Gear Revengeance. Firstly, Raiden is mostly presented to us as a stoic hero, whose simple moniker is to protect the weak. This is Raiden's philosophy throughout the game, and it's so simple and broad that many players can seem to identify with it. But, with that simple moniker and philosophy comes a greater challenge, that being the challenging of said philosophy. Raiden is constantly challenged on his philosophical beliefs throughout the entire game and from every single boss, the most notable being Jetstream Sam. Now, I'm going to summarize this for the sake of time, but if you are interested, then please take a look at Meti's Jetstream Sam character analysis, shown here and in the icon right above. Basically put, Raiden's broad spectrum of who is weak and who is strong is called into question, and at points, we sometimes find it rather hard to focus on Raiden's ideals when they are so directly challenged and even broken within seconds of dialogue. Sometimes even Raiden himself, the very holder of said philosophies, he sometimes even finds it difficult to challenge others and sometimes growing displacent in his own standing of his once famous philosophy. And nowhere is that more true than in two of the game's greatest battles, Sam and Armstrong. Both of these characters challenge Raiden's hardened belief the most and even break through to him, especially Armstrong. Not only does Raiden change his philosophy greatly after his final battle, but he changes back into a newly formed man, adopting a part of Armstrong's philosophy and modifying it in order to benefit others. Or so I presume, since the ending didn't really tell me much. Throughout Raiden's journey, his philosophy is both challenged and called into question repeatedly. Even the very reason he fights is harmed, and albeit a lot more brutally. That being said, what makes Raiden so different from the runner-up awaiting their bad moments to shine? Well, firstly, take note of what I said. Raiden was challenged throughout the game, not just through his fights and bitter rivalry, but rather through philosophy and belief. His simple protect the innocent moniker isn't gonna cut it, and this shows throughout the game, and its many dialogues and speeches. And yes, I'm calling these speeches. Not only that, but he begins to understand his own philosophy and how it's not going to cut it. Get it? No? Okay. So, we can see Raiden clearly evolve as both a person and protagonist. Even against his adversaries, he still tries his best and even loses only to come back on top like an underdog. You know, to gain that big sweet victory. No fight is easy for Raiden, especially in the physical or mental realm. And that is proven again and again with how the character develops and grows, which shows a great representation for how a character should be. Now, who exactly can take the spot of a terrible protagonist? Surely, given that we set the bar so high in character quality that it's almost impossible to find any character to fill that void without them being with a last name called Sue. You know, like Mary Sue, or Gary Sue, or Danny and Terry Sue. Right? Right? Well, not this time. This is Rey, from the sequel trilogy of Star Wars for the new and possibly uneducated viewer. You see, Rey suffers from a plethora of problems masqueraded as a part of her character. Although there are hundreds to choose from, I choose this one in particular because of the flaws not only present, but featured within her character and character development. Let's first start with said character development. Her focus. During the whole trilogy, we hardly had much time dedicated to focusing on Rey and her development, which is something pivotal in Star Wars and its creation. Whether it be the main character training or be more screen time, so that way we can capture the personality within said character. Here, however, we don't ever really get that, which was a genuine criticism within the trilogy of Star Wars and trilogy of films that led to the big fall of the third trilogy. So, Rey's lack of training has been explained, and it sucks, as stated by IRM Online, and even some diehard fans on Reddit state their confusion and outrage during the showing of the trilogy. Now, this is just my personal opinion. The fact that your protagonist can even compare to that of those trained for years in the art of fighting is preposterous. Whereas when we look back at Raiden and his battles, we can see how and why he stacks up. His training, years of experience, and even cybernetics, if I wish to even go further, I'd even state that Jetstream Sam has the same, if not more experience, given that he's cut down crime lords with nothing but his sword and no arguments, armed with only his training and his blade. Here, Rey can take on any potent and trained Darkseid user, and has a lot more power with the Force than, say, Kylo Ren, the grandson of the late Anakin Skywalker. So that's striking me. You cannot give your character immense power unless you wish to take it away, just as quickly as you've demonstrated it, as this creates an unbelievable power gap and logic gap. Making your readers grow question marks on their forehead isn't the intention of telling a story. Should you make them perfect at everything, then you fall into the soup pit, which is what Rey does.
Electrical overload.
I can fix that.
This hyperdrive blows are gonna be pieces of us in 3 different systems. What'd you do?
I bypassed the compressor.
Now, this is logically what should have happened, but it didn't. Instead, the ship is fixed and saved. Strike dose, giving your character perfect abilities. You know the joke, X is perfectly balanced with no problems whatsoever? Well, this is the problem with the word perfect. It means it works in a way that makes it the most advantageous, and sadly, the character being good at everything ties into strike thrace. Given that you make your character perfect at everything, a problem can occur rather quickly. Not within the story, but rather within your reader. They'll get dulled out and bored, making the story that seemed, well, good and promising turn into a slag heap of messy and incoherent positives that have no negatives. It's like adding too much sugar to a cake or to a pitcher of lemonade. The taste you were aiming for and constantly trying to compensate for has been ruined by you and your own worries and insecurities about the character. Then finally, there's strike thrace, the perfect conflict. Now remember what I said about that word perfection. In this aspect, it's even worse. Now I want you to close your eyes, alright? Picture this. A game that you can play and will always win, where there isn't any challenge or difficulties, where you do not learn, you do not grow, and always get what you want. To some, it sounds like the perfect game, but in execution, you will eventually, if not immediately, find it boring and quickly leave it. This is the same with conflicts within the story. If the conflict is intense, or even somewhat intriguing or thrilling, you can forget the idea of your character even being recognized or liked by anyone. This constitutes for Rey in multiple forms. She's powerful or all-powerful. She's unstoppable and seems to win in every fight she enters. embracing the full essence of what it means to be a Mary Sue. Looking back to our previous examples and even previous protagonists of Star Wars franchise, as a whole, each of them lost a battle that forced them to come back much more powerful and a lot more stronger. This tells you that the character has perseverance, or is something that he's invested in. He's trying to get back up there. He's trying to win. He wants something so badly that he'd go through hell and back to get it. Pardon my language, by the way. And to really accentuate that point, you can see this within almost every protagonist, character, or so on within the Clone Wars, within the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, and even within a lot of other series. That perseverance and tenacity is what makes a character likable and lovable. And of course, what makes a character as a whole. When it comes to heroes or villains in the protagonist role, it's sometimes easy to forget that your focus can drift off elsewhere. This is easier said than done in the realm of writing, as you can't change your book's perspective, at least not easily anyway. But in the realm of movies, television shows, and even animation, perspective and context change within the span of a finger snap, thus be longer and more drawn out. The problem with this kind of focus is the fact that you can lose your protagonist in translation to the big screen or small one. Let's look at Star Wars yet again. Sadly, we gotta go back to you. Here, in most of the pictures, we can see that both Kylo and Rey receive the same amount, if not similar amount, of screen time. Heck, when we were watching this, I found that the film almost seemed to be shifting the perspective of the protagonist onto the shoulders of Kylo. We see his weakness, his losses, and even his redemption. Which, dear God, way to go there on that one. Man, way to go, ripping off everything. Anyway, this is where the problem I said comes into play. The loss of who the protagonist is. When you fail to recognize that your protagonist is slowly sinking into the role of a supporting character instead of fixating them into that role, you have a focus problem, and thus viewers leave wondering who to root for. Now, unless you are doing this the Metal Gear Revengeance way, in which case, good. That's good. But find a reason to make your fans debate over the ideologies within the world you created. That should spur them further into your story and into the world. But if not, then you've definitely made a mistake.
Oh no,
A
oh
massive
no.
one. Now, I'm not going to lie when I say this sounds pretty complicated. Philosophies, ideologies, beliefs, ways of thinking, different cultures. I'm surprised that all this jargon hasn't made you head spin by now, but in truth, these are all the mistakes that many old and experienced writers tend to make out of laziness, or to keep some relevancy. Truth is, it's a lot simpler than you may be thinking at the moment. Alright, let's do this again. Trust me. Close your eyes and picture nothing. Tune out all the white noise and ambience filling your room and ignore the small, tiny bit of ringing in your ears, which might be prompted to do, and think. What truly makes a character? Or better yet, a protagonist? Think hard on this one. It's the challenges. It's the challenges they face and how they overcome it. Look back at what I said prior to this. The ease of which Rey won her battles and the emotional and challenging beliefs Raiden faced when battling the many, many wins that batter against his ideology before Armstrong broke through. It's the challenge that makes the character, that forges heroes and leaders, and can spring forth the greatest heroes or the most desperate of villains and evils. A hero and a villain, let alone a protagonist, is thrown through a world unfamiliar to them, or a side of it that's unfamiliar. And as they jump and leap between platform to platform, all you see is them trying their best to either survive, succeed, and eventually achieve victory. Even if they lose the battle, the war can still be won, whether it be by initiative, cunning, constitution, vigor, or even boldness. And truly, that is what makes a good character. Hey there, ladies, gentlemen, and fellows too. Thanks for watching my first HTWAS, or How to Write a Story for short, or long. Leave a like and subscribe, because there will be much more made eventually. But this project was definitely time consuming to the point where I think I left Night Owl on the perch, if you will, with editing his videos. So, for now, hopefully you learned a thing or two about protagonist. But now comes the fun one. You know the one. The antagonist.